Fleet Admiral Kalorthes was sitting listening to the latest reports from the months-long investigation into a new species discovered 2 years ago. The reports were frankly terrifying to him, and he was wondering what his report back to the Council would do. As the last speaker finished their report, Kalorthes thought back on their orders to investigate the military potential of this species. They had been given a bare-bones report on their history and what the scientists had discovered about their growth as a species, from diverging from their animals' ancestors to their current situation of being very close to leaving their planet and entering the wider galaxy. A persistent predator species with an omnivore diet was not exactly common in the galaxy, but something in this species made it so much more. Kalorthes had a momentary thought that it might be the fact that they were never a predator species at all, but had developed into it. He shook his head to get rid of extraneous thoughts and got back to work. But a year ago, the Fleet Admiral received orders to form up an investigation fleet based on a moving space station equipped with massive computer systems and equipment capable of copying billions of minds and running simulations to determine how a species would react to various scenarios based on the military intervention on their planet. The Sarth Council had developed this technology to reduce military losses upon discovery of new species and deciding how to introduce the Council to the new species. Do they introduce themselves as friends, or will they need to be subdued? The supporting fleet units were a mixture of defensive units from dreadnoughts down to frigates, support freighters and manufacturing ships, entertainment vessels, and even garbage collectors. Thousands of ships and a vast space station, and all focused on a single species. Each 8 months ago, the fleet had arrived into the target species system and had taken up position behind the largest planet to hide as much as possible from detection by the natives. This planet was also a good source of fuel and other volatiles required by the vessels in the fleet. A nearby asteroid field further in system was a source of metals and other materials they might need over the course of their investigation. Scanning ships were sent in under full ECM to do flybys of the native planet and collect copies of tens of millions of their minds for the experiments. They were collecting these mind copies from all sections of the planet and covering as many different social groups or countries as the natives described them. The differences in the various groups was not strange, as they had seen many different species with the same fractures and groupings, and that is why they always copied minds from as many groups as possible, not just the most technologically advanced ones. 6 months ago, Fleet Admiral Kalorthes was notified that the collection of minds had been completed, with 438,627 minds copied and uploaded into the station's computer systems and sorted into the various social groups and ready for experimentation. Kalorthes gave the order for the various experiments to be started, and he knew that it could take weeks to months to get results that could be trusted to determine the danger level of this species. 1 week ago, Kalorthes entered the meeting room and sat down at the command chair. He waited until everyone had found their seats and finished organizing their reports before announcing the start of the meeting. "Very well, people. I was notified that we have verified reports on the investigations carried out on these humans, and that your conclusions have been accepted by the full team of researchers. We will start with the data from the current levels of this species, and then start working backwards. Is that okay with everyone?" Getting a series of agreements, Kalorthes pointed at the lead researcher to start. "Admiral, we took 10 million minds from social groups across their planet and data on their current level of military might and domestic access to weapons. We then ran scenarios of how they would react to an invasion of their planet in the associated social group areas. There is quite a lot of inequality between the top and bottom of the groups regarding military might, but even some of the lowest groups still had access to quite a lot of weapons that could do damage to our troops. We didn't find many groups that didn't have any access to any military weapons at all. Those were to be considered outliers and ignored at this stage. Since this species doesn't have any space-worthy vessels, we didn't worry about any space or orbital combat with our ships. They do have a range of missiles, a really surprising number of them actually, that could pose a threat to our orbiting vessels, and any invasion force would have to be constantly scanning for launches and take appropriate action. If any of our vessels were struck by one of their missiles, we could lose that vessel completely, so that danger is classed as extreme. Our next stage of research was to experiment with the mines to determine how they would react to an invasion force landing in their various group areas. This was terrifying. Close to 73% of the social groups we had were capable of wiping out our invasion force with up to a 5-to-1 disadvantage. Even with our advanced weapons, armor, and tactics, they were capable of inflicting obscene amounts of casualties, and the worst part is that when they captured any of our technology, they were capable of reverse engineering it in a very short amount of time and producing hybrid weapons to attack us with within weeks. The social groups that weren't able to wipe out our invasion groups were still capable of inflicting serious amounts of casualties that would cause us to need to reinforce our troops. These group areas were left unsecure even months after we won the fight. Conflict in these areas would continue as the humans didn't give up like any rational species would. We then started reducing their technology level to determine how effective they would be as warriors, and we found out that we would still be defeated in a lot of areas, with troop advantages as high as 3-to-1 against these humans. Reduction of technology back to their ancient history levels of swords and shields against our weapons, and even with 1-to-1 troops, we had casualties at levels that would cause us to withdraw within 2 years. Again, they would salvage any captured weapons and start using them against us within weeks. These humans appear to be able to understand weapons quite quickly and are capable of using them with very little practice. Some groups simply didn't understand the weapons themselves, but they were capable of using their terrain and environment to such an extent that it negated our technological advantages, enabling them to inflict casualties. We repeated these experiments 5 times each, with minor variables, and our results were read and argued for weeks before we came to the final conclusion. We need to quarantine this species and keep as far away from them until we have such an advantage that they are no longer a danger. Caelorthes regarded the various researchers who were nodding along with the lead researcher and thought over what he had been told and the data that backed it all up. "Are you sure that we can't just wipe them out? I know it would be costly in terms of troops, but surely we could do it." "We thought of that, sir, and this is the report of what would happen." Caelorthes scanned the final report, and as he read through it, his frill started to rise and quiver in fright. As he reached the end, he had to physically smooth down his frill and settle himself, as the conclusion they came to was still so shocking. "Are you sure that this scenario would be the most probable outcome of an attempt to wipe out this species?" "Yes, sir. We ran this scenario on all minds collected and using their whole planet as the battleground, and we did it 25 times to reach our conclusion. And each time with a margin or error of 3.72%, we found that within 5 years of our first attack, the humans would be launching their own star vessels, capable of defeating ours. Within 8 years, they would have driven us out of their system and have control of the nearest 12 systems. Within 15 years, they would have a fleet stronger than ours currently. That is in numbers as well as technology. Frankly, sir, this species is the most dangerous and frightening species I have ever seen or read about. It is the fact that they are persistent predators that is the danger, sir. They just don't stop coming. The only thing that I could think of that might stop them is destroying their planet right now. But what scares me is that we wouldn't be able to be sure that we killed all of them by launching an asteroid against their planet. What if some of them survived or got away before it hit? Fleet Admiral Carlothes nodded in acknowledgement. The idea of killing a planet full of life was anathema. But to hear a lead researcher declare that even that might not stop this species shook Carlothes down to his core. He was going to send a report to the Council recommending that a 500-ly sphere be set up as a quarantine zone until they were able and confident they could encounter this race without fear. But even then, Carlothes had a small thought that this would never happen.